The sound of Alesia was not the clash of swords. It was the wet, sucking gasp of the spade. It was the sound of 20,000 iron tools biting into the clay of Gaul, turning the earth inside out. Centurion Marcus Valerius, Primus Pilus of the 10th Legion, stood on the wooden ramparts of the contravallation, the outer wall, and listened to the rhythm of the empire. It was September 52 BC. The rain was a fine, misty veil that had turned the world into a monochrome of gray, mud, and brown timber. Marcus's normal was a state of architectural paranoia. For 6 weeks, the legion had ceased to be warriors and had become laborers. They had built a monster, a double ring of fortifications, 14 miles in circumference, strangling the hilltop fortress of Alesia, where Vercingetorix and 80,000 Gauls were starving. But Marcus wasn't looking at the Gauls inside the trap. He was looking outward, toward the empty horizon. His back to the enemy he had come to kill. His reality was defined by the mud. It coated his hobnailed caligae, worked its way under his larica segmentata, and tasted of chalk and dead horses. The machinery of survival here was the shovel. Every foot of earth moved was a second of life bought. Below him, in the ditch, legionaries were planting the stimuli-iron hooks set in logs, buried just beneath the surface to impale ankles. Further out were the lily-slapped pit traps containing sharpened stakes hardened by fire, arranged in a quincunx pattern like the 5-side of a dice. Deep in the trench, Titus. Marcus barked, his voice rasping from the damp air. If a horse can jump it, you're digging your own grave. It's 5 feet deep, Primus, Titus grunted, wiping sweat mixed with rain from his eyes. Unless they have winged horses, they aren't crossing. Vercingetorix has sent riders out, Marcus said, looking at the gray tree line miles away. He's called for a relief army. They come, they will come heavy. Dig it to 6. It was 6 o'clock. The camp was waking up to the smell of sour wine and boiled wheat. But the wheat was the problem. The fragile normal of the siege was built on the assumption of supply. The 10th Legion was eating half rations. The land around Alesia had been picked clean by forage parties. Marcus checked his belt. He was hungry. A gnawing, hollow sensation that had become his constant companion. He looked toward the south, down the muddy track that led toward the territory of the Edourians. Oldest allies in Gaul? The convoy is late, Marcus muttered to his optio, a scar-faced veteran named Drusus. The rain washes out the road, sir, Drusus said, leaning on his pilum. The Aedui oxen are slow, but they'll be here. They know Caesar pays in gold. Marcus watched the empty road. The Aedui are Gauls, Drusus. Gold is heavy. Blood is heavier. The disturbance began as a ripple in the administrative fabric of the camp. It wasn't a horn blast. It was a discrepancy in the morning report. A rider from Caesar's headquarters, a speculator scout named Sextus, rode up to the 10th THS section of the wall. His horse was lathered, steam rising from its flanks in the cold air. He didn't look like a man bringing news of dinner. He looked like a man bringing a plague. Sextus dismounted and scrambled up the ladder to the rampart. He handed Marcus a wax tablet. The seal was broken. Orders from Labionis, Sextus whispered, his eyes darting to the men working in the trench. Keep your voice down, Centurion. Marcus read the tablet. The stylus marks were hurried, jagged. 2. Primus Pilus, Legio X, from Titus Labionis, legate subject. Supply convoy AEDUI 1 TEXT. Convoy delayed. Scouts report heavy movement on southern road. Suspected banditry interfering with grain wagons. Hold gate foreclosed. Do not open for any approaching column without visual confirmation of Roman standards. Rationing protocol. Reduced to 1. Effective immediately, Marcus lowered the tablet. 1/4 rations. The men are already fainting in the mud, Sextus. If we cut the grain again, they won't have the strength to lift a shield. "It's not banditry, Marcus," Sextus said, leaning close, his breath smelling of fear. "I rode the southern trace myself. I didn't see bandits. I didn't see the Aedui wagons." "What did you see?" "Dust," Sextus said. "Miles of it. Moving north, and smoke. The villages along the supply route. They aren't being raided. They're joining. I saw the Aedui cavalry standards, but they weren't guarding wagons. The convoy that never arrived was the disturbance. The Aedui grain train, the lifeline of the Roman army, had vanished. In its place was a ghost. The Aedui have turned," Marcus whispered. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The Aedui were the linchpin of Caesar's logistics. If they had defected, the Roman army wasn't just besieging Alesia. They were marooned in a sea of enemies. Caesar knows. He suspects, Sextus said, but he can't tell the men. If the legion knows the food is gone, panic sets in. That's why the order says banditry. That's why the order says delayed. But it's not delayed, Marcus. It's never coming. The order rescinded too late was the order to trust the allies. The coded message of banditry was a thin veil over the catastrophe, the instability of human judgment. Caesar's reliance on the fickle politics of the tribes had finally snapped. Marcus looked out at the ring of iron they had built. The towers, the ditches, the stakes. It was a masterpiece of engineering. But a fortress without food is just a prison. "Get back to HQ," Marcus told the scout. "Tell Labienus the 10th stands ready. But tell him we can't eat loyalty." Sextus rode off. Marcus stood alone on the wall. He looked at his men digging the trench. They were gaunt, their tunics hanging loosely on their frames. They dug with the mechanical rhythm of the doomed. He had to maintain the lie. He had to keep the normal alive for a few more hours. "Dig?" Marcus roared, channeling his fear into anger. "You call that a trench? My grandmother digs deeper graves for her cats. Put your backs into it." The men grumbled but dug faster. The machinery of survival churned on, fueled by the last calories of yesterday's bread. Midday came and went. The rain stopped, the clouds lifted, and then the horizon moved. It started as a low vibration, similar to the sound of the ocean, but deeper. It was the sound of wooden wheels, hooves, and feet. Thousands of feet, Marcus looked south. The road where the Aedui grain wagons should have been was empty. But the hills behind the road were teeming. A line of figures appeared on the ridge. 3 miles away. Then another line. Then a mass. It poured over the crest like a slow, dark oil spill. It wasn't a convoy. It was the relief army. COMMIUS, the attribution had arrived. And he hadn't brought 20,000 men. He hadn't brought 50,000. The intelligence reports the factual disturbance had estimated the relief force at perhaps 80,000. Manageable? A hard fight, but manageable. Marcus watched the horizon fill. The mass stretched from the eastern ridgeline to the western river. It was a sea of humanity, 250,000 Gauls. They spilled onto the plain, their war horns blowing a terrifying, dissonant braying of the carnix that sounded like screaming animals. The sound washed over the Roman fortifications, drowning out the spades. "Gods," Drusus whispered, stepping up beside Marcus. "The whole world is here." The Aedui cavalry, the friends who were supposed to bring the wheat, were riding in the vanguard. Waving their swords, their betrayal absolute. Marcus felt the psychological weight of the trap. They were encased in a donut of mud. Inside the center hole was Vercingetorix with 80,000 starving warriors. Outside the ring was Commius with 250,000 fresh ones. And in the middle, trapped in a strip of land barely a few hundred yards wide, were 50,000 exhausted, hungry Romans. Then normal collapsed. The digging stopped. Every legionary stared at the impossible numbers on the horizon. The fatigue, the hunger, the cold it all crystallized into a singular moment of clarity. There was no way out. Marcus looked at the lilies in the ground. The sharp stakes looked pathetic against the human tide. "Form up!" Marcus shouted, his voice cracking. "Tools down! Pila up!" To the ramparts, the men scrambled. They dropped their shovels and grabbed their shields. The transition from laborers to soldiers was clumsy, fueled by panic. "They aren't attacking yet," Drusus said, his hands shaking. "They're forming up. They're waiting for Vercingetorix to signal from the inside. They're waiting for night," Marcus said. He looked at the sun, which was beginning to dip toward the western hills. He watched the horizon burning red and thought it was dawn, till he realized the sun was still hours away. The red wasn't the sun. It was the torches. The Gauls were lighting thousands of torches on the ridge. A ring of fire to match the ring of iron. They were psychological masters. They wanted the Romans to see the scale of their death before they delivered it, Marcus realized. The sun was still hours away from rising on a day he might not see. The burning red was the signal fire from the inner citadel of Alesia, answering the relief army. Vercingetorix had seen them. The trap was primed. The convoy that never arrived had been the hope of survival. Now, the only hope was the wall. Marcus drew his gladius. He ran his thumb along the edge. It was dull from cutting wood. "Drusus," he said quietly, "check the scorpion bolts. Make sure we have the incendiaries ready." "We have 20 pots left, Marcus. That's it. And don't miss." Marcus looked out at the vast, torchlit ocean of enemies. The confusion of the morning, the missing grain, the delayed orders had been replaced by the brutal simplicity of the siege. There were no more questions. There were no more lies about bandits. Only the moo.